Roberto, who's dealt with difficult neighbors before, barely looked up from his work. Ma'am, we're building on private property with proper permits. Everything's legal. Whose property? Who authorized this? You'd need to contact Mountain View Holdings, ma'am. I just build fences. I watched the entire meltdown from my security cameras, sipping coffee on my porch. Patricia spent the next 3 hours making increasingly frantic phone calls, trying to figure out who owned the lot. She called the county, the real estate agent, even the police, who politely explained that property owners have the right to fence their land. But the real fireworks started that weekend when 12 families showed up for their lake vacation bookings. They couldn't access my property because of the new fence, and Patricia had to meet them at the blocked entrance, refunding money from her own pocket, while making increasingly desperate excuses. That's when I decided it was time to end this charade. Monday morning, I called Patricia directly. "Hi, Patricia, it's David. I think we need to talk." "David, thank goodness. This fence situation is ridiculous. We need to work together to resolve this access issue for our community members." "Actually, Patricia, I have a better idea. There's an emergency HOA meeting tonight at 7. I'll be there to discuss the situation publicly." The community center was packed that evening. Patricia sat at the head table, probably thinking she could spin this as me being an unreasonable neighbor. She had no idea what was coming. I stood up and addressed the room. "Before we begin, I'd like to clarify something about this fence everyone's discussing. The fence is built on property I recently purchased through Mountain View Holdings, LLC. I have every legal right to fence my own land." Patricia's face went white. You bought the Henderson property?" "Yes, completely legally. Just like I have the legal right to prevent someone from fraudulently listing my private lake as a vacation rental." I opened my folder and began distributing printed evidence to the board members. "These are screenshots of unauthorized rental listings charging people to access my private property. This constitutes fraud, identity theft, and theft by deception." The room erupted. Board members were shuffling through the evidence, while community members started shouting questions. Patricia tried to regain control, pounding her gavel, but nobody was listening. "Furthermore," I continued, "here are signed statements from 23 families who paid deposits for lake access they were never legally entitled to. Security camera footage shows Patricia photographing my property from the road without permission. And here's a particularly interesting email, where she calls me selfish for protecting my private property rights. One board member, Thomas Chen, stood up. "Patricia, is this true? Did you list this man's private lake without his permission?" Patricia's mouth opened and closed like a fish. "I was trying to increase community value. The lake was just sitting there, and people were asking about recreational opportunities. It's my private property," I said firmly. "You had no right to list it, charge people for access, or keep that money." Which raises an interesting question: where did all those booking fees go? The silence was deafening. Another board member, Sandra Kim, leaned forward. "Patricia, show us the HOA account deposits. If this was official business, there should be financial records." Patricia's face cycled through several colors. "I was going to transfer the funds. I just hadn't processed the paperwork yet." That's when Janet stepped forward. "My client is prepared to file criminal charges for fraud, identity theft, and theft by deception. However, he's willing to consider alternatives if the board takes immediate action." The emergency meeting devolved into complete chaos. Board members were demanding Patricia's resignation, while she tried to maintain that she'd acted in the community's best interest. Someone mentioned calling the district attorney. Another person pointed out the HOA's potential liability for Patricia's actions, the vote to remove. Patricia, as president, was unanimous, with Patricia screaming about proper procedures, even as security escorted her out. But the story doesn't end there. Over the next month, the consequences kept piling up. The real estate brokerage where Patricia worked part-time launched an ethics investigation after clients complained about her conduct. Families who'd been turned away from my lake demanded full refunds plus compensation for ruined vacations. The final twist came 6 weeks later. I was working on my dock when I saw a familiar white Range Rover, parked by my new fence. Patricia was sitting in the driver's seat, just staring at the barrier that had ended her HOA career. She sat there for 20 minutes before finally driving away. Learned later that she'd tried to buy the Henderson property herself. Not knowing I already owned it through my LLC, she'd actually submitted an offer to Janet's office, which was politely declined since the owner intended to keep the property indefinitely. 3 months later, Patricia pleaded guilty to reduced fraud charges. She avoided jail time but got 2 years probation, 400 hours of community service, and had to pay $18,000 in restitution to the families she'd scammed. As for me, I kept the Henderson property and turned it into a small wildlife preserve, complete with native plant gardens and bird-watching areas. The new HOA board, much more reasonable than their predecessor, even gave me a Community Beautification Award. And that fence, I had a tasteful wooden sign installed on it. In elegant script, it simply reads, Private Property Mountain. View Holdings LLC. Sometimes, the best way to deal with entitled people is to let them defeat themselves while you control the battlefield. Resource that's just sitting there unused. Hung up and immediately called my attorney, Janet Morrison. She's committed fraud, identity theft, and about 6 other crimes I can think of off the top of my head, Janet said after I explained the situation. But David, I think we should be strategic about this. Let her dig herself deeper before we strike back. Over the next week, the situation became a complete circus. Families kept showing up at my gate with confirmation emails, expecting lakeside cabins and boat rentals that didn't exist. I had to turn away confused vacationers while explaining that they'd been scammed. Each interaction broke my heart. These were families who'd saved money for a special trip, only to find out they'd been conned. Meanwhile, Patricia was in full damage control mode, but making everything worse. She started telling people there were temporary access issues and promising makeup weekends. She even had the audacity to call me, suggesting I honor the bookings to avoid disappointing families. That's when Janet called with interesting news. David, you know that 5-acre lot adjacent to your property? The one that borders Patricia's backyard? It just went on the market. The Hendersons are relocating for work and need a quick sale. I knew exactly what she was thinking. That lot was strategic. It formed a natural buffer between Patricia's house and the main access road to my lake. If someone owned that property, they could control traffic flow from the subdivision entirely. What are you suggesting? Sometimes the best defense is a good offense. I have a real estate contact who specializes in anonymous LLC purchases. We could have you owning that property before Patricia even knows it's for sale. The plan came together beautifully. I formed Mountain View Holdings LLC and made an all-cash offer, $15,000 over asking price. In a competitive market, the Hendersons jumped at it. The sale closed in 10 days, and Patricia had no clue who the new owner was. The morning after closing, I had the most satisfying conversation of my life with Roberto, my contractor. I need you to build a fence, I told him, 8 feet tall, privacy style, along the entire border between my new lot and Patricia's backyard. And Roberto, I need it done fast. How fast? Have it finished before? Patricia knows what hit her. Roberto and his crew showed up at dawn 3 days later. By 9 a.m., they had post holes dug and were setting the framework. The fence would completely block Patricia's view of my lake and, more importantly, block her access to the main road that led to my property. The explosion happened right on schedule. At 10:30 a.m., Patricia's white Range Rover came screeching around the corner. She practically leaped out of the car, still in her workout clothes, face already turning red. What is the meaning of this? She shrieked at Roberto. You can't build a fence here! This blocks my lake access! The notification on my phone made my blood run cold. Your property listing has received 47 new bookings this week. But here's the thing, I never listed my property anywhere. I own a beautiful 80-acre ranch with a pristine private lake, and some lunatic had apparently put it online as a vacation rental without my permission. I grabbed my laptop and started digging. What I found made my jaw drop. There it was on HOA, Airbnb, and 3 other rental sites. professional photos of my lake, my dock, even my cabin, listed as secluded lake paradise, perfect for family getaways. The description was pure fiction, talking about amenities I didn't have and activities I'd never approved. But the kicker? The contact person listed was Patricia Hartwell, president of the Riverside Estates. At HOA, let me back up and explain how I got tangled up with this woman. I'm David Thornton, and I've owned this ranch for 12 years. My property sits just outside the Riverside Estates subdivision, close enough that some of their residents can see my lake from their backyards, but completely separate from their HOA authority. That distance has been both a blessing and, lately, a nightmare. Patricia moved into Riverside Estates about 8 months ago and immediately got herself elected HOA president. She's one of those people who thinks being in charge of a neighborhood gives her dominion over everything she can see. 50s, always dressed like she's heading to a country club board meeting. And with the social awareness of a bulldozer, the trouble started, almost immediately. She'd show up at my gate with clipboard in hand, explaining how my underutilized recreational resource could benefit the community. I politely declined every time. But Patricia isn't the type to accept no for an answer. She escalated to sending official-looking letters about community partnership opportunities, and even organized a petition among her neighbors demanding I open my lake for shared recreational use. But listing my property online without permission, that crossed every line imaginable. I called the number on the listings immediately. Patricia answered on the second ring, her voice sickeningly sweet. Lakeside Getaways, this is Patricia. How can I help you plan your perfect vacation? Patricia, this is David Thornton. You've listed my private property as a vacation rental without my consent. Take it down immediately. The silence stretched for 5 seconds before she recovered. Oh, David! I was hoping you'd call. I've been fielding so many inquiries about your beautiful lake. The community response has been incredible. I think this could be a wonderful partnership opportunity for remove the listings now or I'm calling the police. Now hold on. Her tone shifted to that condescending voice people use when they think they're being reasonable. I've already accepted dozens of bookings. People have paid deposits. You can't just ruin their vacation plans because you're being selfish about a